Have you ever thought about how hunters once approached deer so quietly that the deer stayed completely calm? It feels almost unreal now, but that level of awareness was normal for American Indian hunters. They moved through the woods so naturally that the deer barely noticed them, and that's where their entire style of hunting begins. But here is what really makes you stop and think. How does a person even begin a hunt like that? How do you prepare to step into the woods and have the entire forest accept you instead of reacting to you? For them, the hunt started long before the bow. It started with scent. Deer do not need to see you. They do not need to hear you. They know you through smell before anything else. So hunters made sure they never carried a trace of human scent into the forest. They washed with plant roots. They steamed themselves with heated stones. They rubbed wild herbs into their skin. They did not mask their scent. They erased it. They replaced it with the scent of the land itself. And here is the part most people never expect. This was not a small ritual. It was survival science. They believed that if a deer smelled something wrong, it would not just run, it would alert the entire forest. Birds, rabbits, squirrels, everything. The whole woods shifted when one deer caught the wrong scent. So if you controlled scent, you controlled the entire chain reaction. And then came the wind. Hunters watched the wind the way sailors watch the ocean. A single shift could determine the success or failure of the entire day. If the wind carried their scent the wrong direction, they simply did not move. They waited, sometimes for hours. The forest is patient. They were too. But even if you smell like the land and move with the wind, how do you walk in a place where every twig and leaf is waiting to betray you? How do you cross a forest without disturbing it? Their solution was simple. Move like the forest moves. Deer walk in soft, low-pressure steps. They pause often. They listen more than they walk. Hunters copied that rhythm. They placed their feet lightly. They shifted their weight slowly. They paused as if they were part of the wind itself. They treated each step like something alive. And what people don't realize is that deer notice how you move more than what you sound like. A confident human stride feels wrong in the woods, but a gentle, uneven, deer-like step feels familiar. Hunters leaned into that rhythm and moved without raising suspicion. They moved like prey, not like predators, and that confused the forest in the best way possible. But blending in was only the beginning. Some hunters stepped deeper into the deer's world. They wore deer hides as clothing. They shaped antlers from wood. They built masks that rested over their heads. They even practiced lowering their heads and breathing the way deer do when grazing. But think about it for a second. How does a human convince another species that they are harmless? How do you become something the deer does not emotionally register as danger? The trick was rhythm. Deer have a soft, slow, unthreatening rhythm when feeding. Hunters studied it for years. They learned how to match it. They moved when the deer moved. They froze when the deer froze. They created the illusion of an animal that belonged there. And there are stories of hunters crawling on all fours, moving in slow arcs through tall grass, getting so close to real deer that the animals barely lifted their heads. Imagine sitting in a deer hide, kneeling in the brush, with a bow in your hand, waiting for the perfect moment. Not a chase, not a battle, just one precise, respectful decision. But disguise was not the only approach. Some hunters relied entirely on knowledge. They memorized the landscape. They learned the routes deer preferred, the times they drank water, the hidden places they felt safest. They did not force an encounter. They stepped into the deer's routine. But how did they know exactly where deer would walk without ever seeing them? How could they predict the animal's path like a map? That is where tracking came in. Their ability to read the ground was almost unbelievable. They could see a bent blade of grass and tell how fast the deer was moving. They could see a single print and know how long ago it passed. They could read the direction of sunlight on mud and estimate if it dried an hour ago or 3. For them, the forest was a language. Every detail was a sentence. They just learned how to read it. They built ground pits along the trails they trusted. These were shallow, camouflaged spaces lined with branches and leaves. Hunters waited inside, sometimes warming their hands over tiny bedded coals to stay steady in the cold. When a deer approached, they did not rush. They simply rose at the right moment and released a single clean shot. And here is a detail many people do not know. They use brush fences too. Long, subtle lines of branches shaped in a wide V. Not walls, not traps. Just enough of a boundary to guide the deer without the deer ever noticing it was being guided. The animals naturally walked into the opening because it simply felt safer, and hunters waited there in stillness. But what about situations where a deer leaves almost no signs behind? How did they track an animal on dry ground, rocky paths, or hard winter snow? They watched the environment instead of the tracks. Birds shifting direction, squirrels pausing, a dust cloud moving slower than the wind, a scrape on a tree that was fresh enough to shine. Everything in nature reacts to deer. The hunters just learned how to notice the reactions. Some hunts lasted hours, others lasted days. There were hunters who followed the same deer from dawn to dusk until the deer finally slowed from exhaustion. Not because they chased, because they persisted. A steady, deliberate walk, a quiet shadow drifting behind the animal hour after hour. What made their hunting so different was not the tools but the mindset. Deer were not trophies. They were not targets. They were part of a shared world. Taking a deer meant giving thanks for it. It meant using every part. The hide became clothing. The bones became tools. The sinew became thread. The organs became food. There was no waste because waste broke the balance that sustained everyone. And here is a truth most people never hear. The best hunters often kept the least for themselves. Elders received the first portions. Families with children received the best cuts. Someone recovering from sickness received the softest meat. Hunting was not a personal victory. It was community protection. When the deer was taken, the forest did not erupt in noise. There were no cheers, just a moment of quiet respect, a soft word, a gesture, a recognition that something living had given its life so others could live. Soft reflective. When you put everything together, you start to see why their deer hunting feels almost unreal to us now. The scent works, the wind, the silent movement, the disguises, the detailed tracking, the deep knowledge of the land, the community sharing. It all came from a relationship with the forest that was built on patience and awareness, and it makes you wonder, how did they learn this much about deer without books, videos, or technology? How did they gather knowledge that most people today would struggle to understand even with modern tools? The answer is simple. They paid attention. Not just once, not just occasionally, every day, every season, every year, for generations. Knowledge passed down not through instructions, but through living inside the world they depended on. It was never about being stronger. It was about belonging. They did not push against nature. They moved with it. They did not force the deer to run. They allowed the deer to remain calm until the right moment. That relationship created a balance where people could hunt without damaging the world that fed them. And maybe that is the biggest lesson. Their hunting was not just skill, it was a kind of respect that shaped every detail. They hunted to survive, yes, but they survived because they honored the very thing they took. They did not hunt for glory, they hunted for balance. And there is something that the modern world is still trying to remember. If this story connected with you, leave a like and take a moment to watch the earlier videos too. Each one ties into the next, and together they make the full picture feel a lot more complete.